Thanks again for joining us for our teaching series, In God We Trust, the Heart of Money.
All right, here we go. No, I'm okay. I'm okay. Thank you, though, Travis. I'm just going to keep this going. All right, so we just celebrated 16 years of marriage, and I'm so grateful for my wife. I'm so grateful for the ways that she has chosen to walk alongside me and remind me of who I am and what matters most in life, which is character and developing that, and how God is using my life. She is so good at doing that. And so we had a chance to get away and go to the Glassburn Inn thanks to someone's generosity, and we're grateful for that. And man, it was such a sweet, sweet time that we were able to spend together. And one of the things that we do is we reflect back and then we look forward together. And this is such a special time for us to be able to do that. But as I look back with Amy, one of the things that we talked about as far as what was a stressor in our marriage was the area of finances. The area of finances. Here we are at 23 years old. And I know it's hard to believe that first picture that we were, we were 23, but we were 23 years old and we got married and we had no clue what we were doing. And as we were going through this journey fresh out of college and understanding life and starting our careers, and thankfully we were able to get our jobs started and lined up our careers going, we didn't know what to do with the money that was coming in. Like, we didn't take a class. We didn't necessarily have someone show us. And so there's a lot of things that we were learning on the fly. And one of the things that you learn as you talk to different people, that there are two types of people in the world. There are those who like to spend, and then there are those who like to save. How many spenders do we have here? Okay, how many savers? How many savers? Now, if you're sitting next to someone who knows you well, you can say, hey, you're lying, you like to spend, you just don't know it, right? Right? Either way, right? Like, we have these two different competing visions and viewpoints about personal finances. I mean, that just happens in life. And as I was going through this and working through this area with Amy, one of the things that also became very apparent to me is I get really bored with process and things that are tedious. And financial health and understanding the process of your personal finances, that requires you to concentrate even in the boredom and the tediousness of it. But oftentimes what I would do is, Amy, you're so good at organization. Girl, you got this. I believe in you, girl. I believe in you. You got this, Amy. You're so good at it. You're an office manager. I mean, I don't know what else speaks of knowing how to operate financial processes more than on being an office manager. You are so good at an organization. But here's the thing with Amy. Amy would say, I am in over my head and I need your help. We need to be doing this together. And so it took us quite a while to figure that out and work through that and ultimately look at what Jesus has for us. And with the help of friends like Jason and Robin McDaniel, who walked alongside us and have helped and cheered us on in this area, we were able to move forward. But we're continuing on this journey because this area of our life doesn't go away. It doesn't go away. It's a very real part of our lives. And if you feel stress, even at the term of money and finances and resources, if that stresses you out, if that causes anxiety, maybe you saw the video as I got up here and you're like, it's a cool video, but I feel anxious already. All those dollar bills coming at me, all that stuff's happening. And if you feel that way and if you feel overwhelmed by it, you're not alone, because that's the number one source of anxiety for Americans. It's money. It's money. It's been reported. And there's a lot of concern around this area. And yet God has something to say for us. And he has something for us in this area that we could move to a place where we could say, God, I trust you. And I want to let you lead me in this area. And he wants to provide for us freedom in the midst of our stress, in the midst of our fears. He wants to give us a freedom in this area of our lives. He wants to show us a way forward. Now, as we begin this series, I just want to say this to you because I think it's important that we understand this, that we as a church and under Jesus and joining him, we want to make it very clear to you that we don't want something from you but for you. We don't want something from you but for you. We want something for you because oftentimes, depending on how you've been brought up, whenever we hear this idea of money in church, we sometimes have a difficult time with that. We have a difficult time seeing how the material world and the spiritual world actually work together. But one of the things that you'll notice when you follow through the 4 Gospels of Jesus, he taught more about money than most anything else. This is Jesus. So Jesus had a lot to say about this area. He had a lot to say for us in regards to this area of our financial health and well-being and to really experience freedom. And what he says to us has everything to do with us living the life that he's intended for us because he wants something for us. He wants something for us. And as we begin this series today, here's my hope, and I want to just land for you where we're going to go with it. We want to really lay out for you a vision of what it is Jesus has to say about this area. And then over the weeks to come, we're going to get practical, but then we're going to talk about a tangible opportunity that will help you to even dig deeper. Because a message on a Sunday morning is only one part of our process, but so much of this area requires you to have more space and time to deep dive and to work through this area. And so we want to make sure we're providing that resource for you. So with that said, I want to invite you to open up with me to Matthew chapter 6. And this is part of a larger thing that Jesus taught, a larger message called the Sermon on the Mount. But as you listen to what Jesus has to say, I want you just to pay attention to how he connects, again, the material and spiritual world. Those two things don't work in isolation according to Jesus and his kingdom. And so I want us to see what he says here. He says this in Matthew 6, starting in verse 19, we're going to be in. It says, "Do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth where moths and vermin destroy and where thieves break in and steal. But store up for yourselves treasures in heaven where moths and vermin do not destroy and where thieves do not break in and steal." And I want to read this highlighted section out loud together. This last part on three. 1, 2, 3. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. And so for Jesus, what he says is he says, hey, the things that you prioritize, the way that you use your money, the way you use your resources has less to do about just the stuff that you acquire and has much more to do with your heart. And Jesus isn't after your stuff. And you're like, oh, good. I like to hear that, right? He's not after your stuff, but he is after you. He loves you. He cares about you. He has a purpose for you. He's made you on purpose and with a purpose in mind. And he knows in order to get to you, he's got to get to your stuff, your money, your resources, because he knows how that works. And so this is not even, as you hear what Jesus says, him being anti us having stuff. That's not what it's saying. He's saying, hey, in the midst of how you're spending, don't lose sight of the vision behind it. Don't lose sight of what I have for your life. Don't lose that perspective. Understand and allow me to lead this area of your life. Make sure that you're not a person who's just investing on earthly things, but you have the eternal in mind, that you're storing up treasures in heaven. And if you've ever decluttered, and we recently have done that because we made several moves, you realize how much stuff you actually have. And you're like looking at all this stuff that you have, and you're realizing, I don't need this stuff, right? I don't need this stuff. It's not going to last. Like I made a Goodwill run yesterday, and I had tons of clothes in my trunk, and I just kept coming with more and more. The guy was like looking at me like, what is going on here? You got so much stuff in your trunk. And it was just a reminder to me, this stuff doesn't last. There's nothing wrong with having stuff, but it's rather about the perspective about the stuff. And how are we leveraging it and using it? Is it in line with God's design for our lives? Are we walking with the assignment that he has created each and every one of us for? And he doesn't want us to lose sight of what's going to last and what won't last. But again, I don't want you to miss this. He's after you. He's after you. When he says at the end here, for where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. The idea of heart is about the whole person. It's about all of you. It's about all of me. It's about every part of who I am. Again, for where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. Continues on here, and it says this, the eye is the lamp of the body. If your eyes are healthy, your whole body will be full of light. But if your eyes are unhealthy, your whole body will be full of darkness. If then the light within you is darkness, how great is that darkness? No one can serve two masters. Either you will hate the one and love the other, or you will be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve both God and money. And so one of the things you hear Jesus saying when you hear this idea of our eyesight and the light being able to come in, the eye scripturally was used to describe our ability to see clearly and to have the right attitude about life in general. And he says, hey, when your eyesight is blocked, when you're unable to see in a physical sense, then you get doubled vision, blurred vision. You cannot see clearly. And he's saying in the same way, when we don't have the proper view and attitude towards our life and our stuff and what God has for us, there's a darkness that overtakes us. And one of the ways that we could look at this is how greed is within us all. And so what we have to be mindful of is that we can see greed in somebody else, but it's difficult to see greed in me, right? I can keep acquiring more and more and more and more and more and not notice, hey, man, you know what? When's enough enough, right? Like, when's enough enough? And nothing wrong with stuff, but he's saying, hey, don't lose sight of the vision that I have for your life, because you cannot serve two masters. You cannot serve two masters. Say that out loud with me. You cannot serve two masters. You cannot do it. You cannot do it. He says you cannot serve God and money. Either you're going to love or hate one, or you're going to be a person, again, he uses this language here, who is devoted to one and despises the other. And he's saying, hey, you've got to make a choice. You've got to decide what you're going to give your life to. Again, he wants something for us, not from us. He wants us to experience freedom, and he knows what will happen when we don't have the right view and perspective and the right attitude about our money and stuff. He knows what it does to our lives. He knows the harm it does to us and to our relationships with others as well. We end up missing what he's intended for our lives. So as we look at this first part, here's a couple things that I want us to understand about what Jesus says. First is this: how we view and use money is a matter of the heart. How we view and use money is a matter of the heart. It's a matter of the heart. Jesus says this very clearly, right? Where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. So it's really about our view and our perspective and our attitude towards it. So how we view and use it. So it's not just one thing to say, I have this view. Your views are meant to be seen in how you choose to live out, right? And Jesus connects those two. He doesn't segment them like we so often like to do. I have this view, but I live this way. He's like, no. That's not how it works. You know, our views are going to lead to how we choose to live our lives as we come under what he has for us. Again, how we view and use money is a matter of the heart. Here's the second part of this. And there's a question for you. Do you master your money, or does your money master you? Do you master your money, or does your money master you? See, there's nothing wrong with possessions and stuff, but another way to say that is, do we possess our possessions, or do they possess us? Are we coming under Jesus' leadership in this area? And even if you're not a Christ follower, I want you to consider, how are you viewing this area of money? What is it doing to you? What is it causing within you? How's it causing anxiety? How's it causing worry? How's it causing sleepless nights? Fighting in your relationships? What's it doing? What's it doing to you? What's it doing to us? Again, do you master your money, or does your money master you? And then here's the last part of this. Jesus has come to give us freedom. This includes in the area of our finances. And I know sometimes when we hear this, we may think in the area of our finances, we may think I'm like doing like an episode of Oprah. You get a car, you get a car, you get a car. You know, it's Ellen's big gift, you know, like, hey, you know, we're giving away this stuff. But really, what I'm talking about and referring to, and I appreciate getting a car. I mean, I would love that. You know, I would love to get a car. I would love to give you a car, right? That would be great. But what this is really speaking to is the fact that in Jesus, he cares about every part of our lives, every single area of our lives. And the reason why he taught so much about this is because, again, he knows how closely it's connected to us experiencing the purposes and the intentions that he has created and designed us for. He knows how they're connected. But through Jesus, through what he has come to do for us, through his life, death, burial, and resurrection, through his authority over those things, and we see him as having authority over those things, through his life, death, burial, and resurrection, providing forgiveness, providing a right relationship with God, providing this future hope, and joining him and bringing that future hope today in the present. When we believe that, when we walk in that, when we see him as having authority, then we realize, hey, you have authority in this area as well. You have authority over every area of my life, every part. And you know what you're talking about. You know what you're talking about. And I'm trusting you. I'm trusting you. And to trust, again, is to put our full weight upon. It's just like when you walked in today. You didn't see if these chairs were sturdy enough, right? I didn't see anybody. Let me weigh this chair. Let me see if it can hold my weight, right? Nobody was doing that, right? There was no testing. You just came in and you sat down on the chairs. In the same way, when we look to Jesus and we say, Jesus, I'm trusting you. I'm allowing you to lead my life, including this area of finances. There is a freedom that he wants to give to us. Now, I want you to just get a sense of what he talks about here when it comes to money and resources and about the heart part of this. But then I want you to see how he connects it. He connects it to something that happens on a regular basis in our own lives. And it is when it comes to worry. Listen to what he says, the very next thing. He says, therefore I tell you, do not worry about your life, what you will eat or drink, or about your body, what you will wear. Is not life more than food, and the body more than clothes? Look at the birds of the air. They do not sow or reap or store away in barns, and yet your heavenly Father feeds them. Are you not much more valuable than they? Can any of you, by worrying, add a single hour to your life? That's just a quiz. How many of you add a single hour to your life by worrying? Show of hands. No, right? It says, hey, it tears us apart when we live in a constant state of worry. It actually hinders our health and our well-being. But he connects our worries, to our resources, our money. He says, hey, don't worry. Don't worry about what you're going to eat or drink, or about your body, what you will wear. And he says, hey, don't lose perspective in the sense of what your life is consisting more of, that it's so much more than that stuff. Not that that stuff doesn't matter. And then he says, look at the birds. And I love this, because my son, who's 3.5, always says, Daddy, look at the birds. Look at the birds. Look at the birds. What's he saying? Hey, look how beautiful they are. Man, look how they're able to do what they're doing. But you see them not worrying about their lives. Now, this is not to give permission not to plan, by the way. And we're going to talk about that in this series. So in case you're like, oh, see, the birds don't plan. Why do I need to plan? See, that's what Jesus is saying, right? No, that's not what he's saying, all right? I know some of us are like, yes, Jesus. That's not what he's saying here. But he's just talking about the care that's given. And he talks about the value that each and every one of us has. You're valuable. You're valuable. Your neighbor's valuable. The people that we come into contact with, they're valuable to him. And then he goes on to say this. He says, and why do you worry about clothes? See how the flowers of the field grow? They do not labor or spin. Yet I tell you that not even Solomon in all his splendor was dressed like one of these. If that is how God clothes the grass of the field, which is here today and tomorrow is thrown into the fire, will he not much more clothe you, you of little faith? So do not worry, saying, what shall we eat, or what shall we drink, or what shall we wear? For the pagans run after all these things, and your heavenly Father knows that you need them. And what does he say? He says, look at the flowers. Look at the flowers. And he talks about King Solomon. And King Solomon had a lot of wealth. He had a lot of great clothes. He was majestic. He was the wisest man to live. He had a lot of stuff. And yet, in the midst of all that he had, Jesus says what he wore does not even compare to what the flowers wear. It doesn't compare their beauty. And he's saying, hey, if he's going to provide clothing for the flowers, how much more is he going to provide for your needs as well? And in this context, I just want to make sure you hear this. He's talking about people who were struggling with comparison, who were struggling with envy, who were jealous about what somebody else had. Not that any of us ever struggle with that. Not that any of us go on Instagram and we see what somebody else got for Christmas and we're like, hey, did you see what this person got? Wink, wink, hint, hint, hey, you dropped hey, how is that playing out in our own lives? Because Jesus is addressing and attacking that area of constant anxiety and where we're worrying. And it may not be that we're envying over what somebody else has, but maybe we have really concerns, a lot of valid concerns about the future. Maybe there's something that we're really, really concerned about with the future. Maybe we're concerned about how we're going to make ends meet. Maybe we're concerned about having savings or being able to go and get dental care when we don't have dental insurance. Maybe for some of us, we're looking at life right now and we're trying to plan for retirement. And man, there's just all these worries that are going on. Some of us, we're like, man, I invested in this and it's not going the way that I thought it was going to go. And there's so much worry. There's so much worry in what's happening. And those are real. I want to be very clear. Those are real. And we don't need to pretend they're not. We don't need to pretend that they're not. So what's the antidote for that? What does Jesus say is the antidote? I want to read this out loud with you. So we're going to do our very best. Not a lot of verses, but on three, we're going to read this out loud together. 1, 2, 3. But seek first his kingdom and his righteousness, and all these things will be given to you as well. Therefore, do not worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will worry about itself. Each day has enough trouble of its own. And so what he says here is the antidote to worry is to seek first your kingdom and your righteousness. Nope, that's not what he says. But that's how many of us are living, and that's why we're so worried. We're seeking first our kingdom and our righteousness and our rightness. He says, no. Seek first God's kingdom, God's agenda for your life, what he has to say about your life. Seek first what he's intended for you. And as a kingdom citizen, join him in what he has for you in his righteousness. And this word righteousness means to join Jesus in bringing about the righteousness that he wants to here on the earth. And we can do that because of the righteousness that we receive from Christ. We're just responding. We're not trying to earn anything. We're just joining Jesus. But we seek first his kingdom and his righteousness. And all these things are going to be added unto us. All the things that we're concerned about. Now, are they going to be like we think they should be? That's not what he said. But does he know better than you and me? Some of us aren't there yet. Some of us are like, I don't think he does. and that's okay, to be honest, if that's where you are right now. But I want you to know my own personal experience. He knows better than I know. And the way he's come up and shown up again and again and again reminds me that I need to allow his kingdom ways to invade my life, to seek first his kingdom and his righteousness. And I love how he attaches this to worry, because he says, therefore do not worry about tomorrow. And some of us, we are so worrying about tomorrow. We're just so worried. And another way to do this is some of us in our desire to be goal-centric and to have a plan for the future, we inadvertently sometimes go through this place of worry. I know I'm guilty of that. I'm so guilty of sometimes not being fully present. But some of us, our thing is not tomorrow, it's yesterday. We're letting the regrets of yesterday hold us hostage to what God has for us today. And he says, hey, the antidote for that is to seek first his kingdom and his righteousness. And he's going to take care of you. He's going to add all these things unto you. So as we think about what Jesus says here, here's a couple other things as we consider this. What do you worry about in regards to your finances? What is it for you? And I want you to just be honest for a moment. Here, I have the mic right here. Come on up. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. That was a joke. Just kidding. But I want you to think about it. What do you worry about in regards to your finances? What are you worried about right now? You know, some of us, as I listed some things, making ends meet, paying bills, the debt that you have. Some of us right now, it's planning for the future. Some of us, it's even thinking about these emergencies that have come up and how do I address them and deal with them. And again, that's not an exhaustive list, but what is it for you? What is it that you're experiencing in this area of your personal finances that's causing worry, stress, and anxiety? We need to be honest about that, because Jesus, you notice how he attaches those two things together. He doesn't say they're two separate things that happen in our lives, that money and worry don't come together. Actually, they do come together. We worry because of money. And so how are we going to address that? So again, what do you worry about in regards to your finances? And here's the next part of this. Turn your worry into worship. So you've identified what it is right now that maybe you're worried about in your finances. I want to invite you to turn it into worship. And that's what Jesus says. Seek first his kingdom and his righteousness, and all these things shall be added unto you. This is a form of focusing our attention on one who is greater than the stress and the worry that we have in this area of our lives. He's greater. And I'll give you a real example for me. A couple years ago, my wife approached me and she said, Joseph, I think we need more space. We need more space because we have a 3.5-year-old, and the way our lot was, all the lots ran together. And my 3.5-year-old son, some neighbors were like, cool, come on over. Some neighbors were like, keep your son out of my yard, right? But for my 3.5-year-old son, it was confusing. It was like, man, how do we help him to know the difference, you know? And he's got that Velarde DNA coming through him, and he does not like no's, you know? He keeps asking, like even this morning, he asked me like 10 questions, or 10 times the same question to get me to say yes, but I kept saying no. I was like, I know that trick, right? But in the midst of that, she approached me and she said, I think that not only do we need to look at this, we need to consider buying the house that my father built, who's now passed away. He built it in 1975. And so she came to me and said, hey, I just want you to think about this. I want you to pray about it. You know, this means we would care for my mom, who's a widow. I want you to think about it. And I had a lot of worries. I was like, man, leaving city life for country living, I don't know about that. That's not really how I'm wired up. You know, living with my mother-in-law, like I love all the mother-in-laws in the house, but the idea of doing that, I was like, okay. You know, I'm like, oh, all right. Ray, how's Ray going to do with this? You know, all these words, these are real things that I had going on in my mind and my heart. And really being able to say, hey, I'm going to be honest about what's going on before the Lord. I'm going to pray about it. I'm going to seek first your kingdom and your righteousness. And I just kept asking, what do you want me to do? What is your will for me here? Because I want to be aligned with what you have for me. I want to be aligned with the assignment that you have for me. And we sought several advisors to speak into this, to get their thoughts on this, to say, hey, what do you think about this? And as we were going through that process, I just sensed when it was time to do it, just this deep peace. Not that everything was perfect. It wasn't. Not that moving wasn't stressful. It was. Not that, you know, there weren't hiccups that came along. They do. But I had a sense of peace that, hey, this is what you have for me. And as we made this move, it was with the intent to not only do all the things Amy had stated, but also to be in a better position, to be more generous, to be more open-handed, to have more to practice wise generosity with, and to say, hey, we want to use whatever you give us to bless others. We want to leverage those resources for your kingdom cause here on the earth. So again, I want to just encourage you this week. It's a good place to start. What is it that you're worried about right now in your personal finances? And turn it into worship. See, worry is when we pray to ourselves and we talk to ourselves about the situation. Prayer and worship is when we talk to someone who actually can do something about it. And that's our Heavenly Father. So the emphasis changes when we move away from worry to worship. And then the last part of this is strive less and surrender more. So as you worship, part of this is to strive less and to surrender more. And as we surrender, there is this deep abiding security, not because we have all the things we want and not because we have all these possessions and no, there's one who's greater. There's one who provides a deep abiding peace. And as we learn to strive less and surrender more, and that doesn't mean we don't work hard, but it's the place in which we're doing the work from. Am I doing it to try to earn something, to prove myself, to keep everything together? That's striving. And can I just be honest? I know I have been guilty of striving a lot of my life. But one of my goals in 2020 is to do this. Strive less and surrender more. Because when I surrender more, there's a deep peace that's mine. When I say, hey, Jesus, I trust you. I trust you. I'm giving this over. I'm going to be honest. I'm going to do what it is that you're asking me to do and how you're asking me to do it. I'm willing to let you lead me, and I'm willing to do the steps that you're asking me to take in order to experience financial freedom. And so one of those steps may be for you to join in this course that we're doing, this 9-week course. It's called Financial Peace University. Financial Peace University. And I want to invite Jason McDaniel to come up. He's going to be leading this course to tell you a little bit more about it. Can we give it up for Jason? And I mentioned him before in the message that he was helpful in my own personal finances and having this perspective on it. Jason.
All right. Thanks, Joe. So if this topic, this kind of subject of financial peace, and what God says about finances is resonating with you today, whether you're among the millions, dare I say most Americans that are wrestling with credit card debt, whether anxiety about finances is having an impact on your life, on your marriage. Whatever your specific story is, we wanted at Riverbend to kind of walk with you in this practical area of life. And we know really the gap might not be, hey, I want this for myself, but how do I get there? Because this isn't something that everyone, not all of you dream about spreadsheets, you know, and sometimes this is one of those topics that people think about. It's like, I don't even know where to start. So as we were thinking and praying about this, we decided to launch Dave Ramsey's Financial Peace University. Some of you may be familiar with it. It's a program that's been around for a while, and it's helped millions of people really just get their arms around this really practical area of life. And you'll go through it. Like the tools could kind of get you to understand finances for any purpose. Here at Riverbend, our heart for you is to help you close the gap with what God has called you to around your finances, because you'll find that finance and resources either will enable or detract and limit you from where you're going. And what we want for you is that you're making those decisions intentionally, that life isn't just happening to you, that finances, oh, I'm in this terrible situation, I don't know how to get out of it, but that you understand the trade-offs you're making, and you're making them, you know, in light and from a place of understanding what God has for you and understanding kind of the end from the beginning. So this is a resource that we'll be launching starting January 25th, so not this Saturday or next Saturday, the third Saturday from now, at 2 p.m. at Riverbend Community Church. We'll be using Dave Ramsey's resources. It's about an hour and a half in duration, 2 p.m. on Saturdays. It's a 9-week commitment. Just I'll say this here, there's nothing magical that says Dave Ramsey is the only resource out there, and it certainly doesn't compare with the weight of the Bible in terms of impact. This is just a set of tools, and not the only one out there, but a good set of tools to help you in the, kind of practically understand how do I demystify this topic of money and get from here to there around practical areas like creating a spending plan, a budget, as you know. I prefer spending plan, a little bit more empowering, but creating a spending plan, getting your arms around and dealing with this topic of debt, retirement, just a lot of these practical areas that if you're not in an industry and don't really understand the details of it, can easily overwhelm us. There are other resources, and we're not here at Riverbend to say this is the only one for anyone, but this is a good one, and we're going to use this one just to provide a practical application for each of us here. There is a cost associated with it. No one here at Riverbend is making any money off of this, but they have a whole team and resource group behind this at Financial Peace University down in Nashville, Tennessee. So they charge $99 for their materials. In my experience, if something costs you nothing, sometimes you value it at nothing. So it's not a bad thing to have to spend some money for these resources and access. If, however, this is a financial hardship in your specific situation, talk to us. Because what we don't want here is someone not to be able to participate in something that can help them in this area of life because of the place that they're in this area of life, if that makes sense. So I'll be out in the hall afterwards to answer additional questions. Hopefully we kind of covered the highlights here, and hope to see many of you able to join us as we just dive into this really practical area of life.
Thank you so much, Jason. Let's give it up for Jason. We appreciate him and his leadership. And again, we want something for you.